Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Welcome back to CBSN. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has called state lawmakers back to Austin for a special legislative session focused on his conservative priorities. The governor unveiled the agenda just 24 hours before the special session began yesterday. Lawmakers are discussing issues ranging from elections and voting to social media censorship. Abbott says Texas has, quote, unfinished business. But some in the state feel the governor's motivation for the session is his own self-interest. Let's bring in Adam Brewster now for more. He's a CBS News political reporter. Hi, Adam. Great to see you. So tell us a little more about why the governor has called this special session and what will be discussed.
This story goes back to Memorial Day weekend when, you may recall, Texas Democrats in the state house walked out of the final hours of legislative session in order to defeat a bill that would have overhauled the state's election laws. Shortly thereafter, Governor Abbott said, we're going to have a special session at some point this summer. We need to address this issue about elections. He also at that point mentioned bail reform. That was another priority that didn't get finished in the regular legislative session. A few weeks went by, and just before the special session was set to start, they unveiled the agenda. Of course, elections and bail reform were on the agenda. As you mentioned, social media censorship, other hot-button conservative issues such as critical race theory or transgender participation in school sports. So it is really set to tackle a large amount of issues. They only have 30 days to get through everything, so they have already hit the ground running. The major election bills have been introduced. Those are set to get hearings tomorrow. So things are on the ground and running in Austin as they set to tackle as much as they can that the governor wants them to over the next month.
And of course, changes to election laws are among the biggest concerns to the state's Democrats. What does this legislation from Republicans look like?
So broadly speaking, it looks fairly similar to the bill that was on the table at the end of the normal session in May when Democrats walked out and defeated that bill. Many of the provisions that are in there were in that bill, including a ban on drive-through voting, no longer allowing 24-hour voting periods during early voting. Those are both practices that were used by Harris County during the general election. Harris County is home to Houston, one of the biggest counties in the country. And then there are other provisions adding ID requirements to absentee ballot requests, some protections for poll watchers, some new things that were actually not in the bill last time are provisions that allow voters to fix minor issues that they may have with their ballot, a process known as curing. Perhaps what's most notable about these bills is what is not in them compared to what was there in May. One of those was a provision that would have lowered the standard for overturning elections based on fraud. That is something that is not in either the large Senate or House version of the election bill. And then the other dealt with Sunday voting. The bill in May wouldn't have allowed it to start until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Democrats, civil rights groups, and others, said that this was an attack on souls to the polls, traditional voter mobilization, part of the Black community and Black churches. And so these bills, there is one in the House, there's one in the Senate that are sort of these large bills that cover a wide variety of issues. They both, allow Sunday voting to start earlier in the day, in the morning. But, there have been other bills that have been filed by Democrats, but there are really two to keep an eye on, a large bill in the House, a large bill in the Senate, and they largely agree on what they would like to see in terms of changes to the state's election law.
And of course, as you mentioned earlier, Adam, last month, Democrats staged a walkout to block the GOP's first attempt at changing voting laws. But, they don't have a majority in either legislative chamber. Do they have any other recourses to continue blocking these conservative proposals? How many times can they walk out?
Well, certainly they have said all options are on the table. That was probably the most dramatic option that they have on hand. The House Speaker did say before the session started, all options are on the table for him as well. So we'll have to see sort of how this plays out. If, Democrats are able to get some concessions from Republicans. On the House side of things, they did work out some deals on a version of the elections bill in May. That's not how the final version ended up, but we've seen Democrats and Republicans sort of work on the House side of things together. And there are sorts of procedural tactics that Democrats can bring up as well. There are 30 days in this special session, but at the end of the day, Governor Abbott can keep calling special sessions until he gets, his priorities accomplished. So there is sort of this inevitability about what may happen. Democrats are expected to push back on anything they view as too restrictive, but at the end of the day, they do have some limits as to what they can do to prevent something from being passed ultimately.
And so, Adam, our Ed O'Keefe spoke to one Democratic lawmaker who said, quote, the worst kept secret in Austin is that Greg Abbott is running for president. So, is that really what's at play here? Has the governor signaled that he wants to make a run in 2024? And if so, even if he doesn't, is he worried about his own reelection battle? He is facing some competition.
I don't think the Greg Abbott 2024 bumper stickers have been printed just yet. And certainly that's something you're going to hear from Democrats, right? This is about Governor Abbott wanting to boost his, profile on the national stage or bolster his conservative credentials. And certainly the items on the agenda do suggest that, he is focused on some issues that Republicans around the country are focused on. We saw Governor Abbott recently go to the border with former President Trump. He's certainly popular among Republicans. I think, every Republican is playing the same waiting game of seeing whether former President Trump decides to run again in 2024. It's certainly something that he may do, but he is also facing a couple of challenges from his right in the 2022 primary. As to how serious those will be, it kind of remains to be seen. His campaign sort of dropped the hammer yesterday and said, in the last 10 days of June, they raised almost $19 million, and the governor is sitting on $55 million cash on hand, an astounding amount of money, more than a year out from his reelection campaign. The primary will be in the early part of next year. So he has some challengers. They're coming at him from his right, trying to appeal to some of the anger that conservatives have had with Governor Abbott. But he certainly appears to be in good standing heading towards a reelection bid.
All right. Well, Adam Brewster, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tanya.